Welcome, and thank you for joining today's conference, Flexible Ramping Product Refinements, Buffer and Min. Before we begin, please ensure you've opened the chat window by using the associated icon located at the bottom of your screen. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. All audio lines have been muted until the Q&A portion of the call. We will give you instructions on how to ask a question at that time. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded. With that, I'll turn the call over to Radha Madrigal, Lead Client Trainer. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Tegan. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Radha Madrigal, and I'll be taking you through today's session. I am joined virtually by some of my colleagues who may speak up during Q&A or to provide clarity when needed as we discuss this topic. We're here to talk about the changes being implemented for the Flexible Ramping Product Refinements Initiative. The scope of this effort for 2020 includes the items that we refer to as buffer and min. In an effort to increase transparency and provide greater service to our stakeholders, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted on our website so that you can review it in the future and for those who were not able to join today's call. For those that are with us this morning, these slides are posted on kaisa.com and can be found in the Learning Center under New Modules and on the Release Planning page under the Independent 2020 Releases. Here is today's agenda. We will be going over a quick review of the background for the Flexible Ramping product. We'll discuss the scope of changes for the items being implemented in 2020, and we'll go over the activities that will occur during market simulation. Before we discuss the initiative, I wanted to point out a couple of acronyms that we'll be using today. We've added these acronyms here and the terms they refer to for your reference. You'll be able to refer to these if you want to pull up the slide deck that's posted on kaisa.com so that you can take a look at that throughout the presentation. And now we're going to review a little bit of background information on these changes. The Flexible Ramping product was introduced into the real-time market to manage ramp capability to address the uncertainty related to load and variable energy resources that materializes between market runs. Prior to implementing the Flexible Ramping product, the ISO observed that the multi-interval market optimization would solve forecasted net load by utilizing the precise amount of ramp needed across that market horizon. However, when system conditions changed in subsequent market runs, the market would have insufficient ramping capability in the real-time dispatch. Over time, we have seen that we need to make some improvements to the Flexible Ramping product. There was a report published in September of 2019 called the CAISO Energy Markets Price Performance Report that identified some issues that need to be addressed. As you can see, the slide here includes a link to that report if you would like to learn more about that. The Flexible Ramping product secures additional ramping capability that can be dispatched in subsequent market runs to cover a range in the forecasted net load. Resources providing this ramping capability are compensated at the marginal opportunity cost for both forecasted movement and uncertainty awards. There are two items in scope for implementation as an independent 2020 release. The first item, Scope 1, for the buffer, will be to maintain up to 100% configurable of FRP awards in the buffer interval that were procured in the prior 15-minute market to preserve ramping capability for the real-time dispatch. This is different from the way we do it today in that we may not reserve the energy procurement of the FRP if system conditions change from the advisory. So the energy schedule in that binding interval may actually ramp some of the procured FRP. With this new buffer requirement, it will not. The second item, Scope 3, will be to enforce a minimum FRP requirement in the balancing authority area that will ensure a minimum amount of FRP to be procured from resources within the BAA. The changes being made for this particular initiative are internal changes to the market logic. Unlike other changes that involve software enhancements, there is nothing new for you to see. No screen changes, no new reports, no updates to the tech specs, no settlements configuration, no changes to the settlements configuration guides or the ISO tariff. With that said, there are changes being made to our business practice manuals that will explain this new methodology, and you'll see those changes in the market instruments and the market operations BPMs. We do have an item identified as Scope 2, which will be implemented in 2021. This relates to demand response participation. In 2021, we will change the proxy demand resource dispatch capability default from 5 minutes to hourly. Coincidentally, this portion of the initiative will be discussed at the next ISO Board of Governors meeting during the general session. If you are interested in hearing that discussion, you'll want to tune in to the general session web conference, which will take place on October 1st. Now, before we get into the readiness activities, does anyone have questions about what we've covered so far?
If you'd like to ask a question, please dial #2 on your telephone keypad. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted, at which point please state your name, the company you work for, and question. Again, that's #2 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. All right, we do have a caller on the question queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Chen Yu from KGNE. I do have a question. In terms of the BPM changes for this initiative, is that BPM already published? And has also further question is, has those changes in the BPM has been highlighted or redlighted?
Guillermo, do you know the answer to that question about whether or not we've submitted the changes to the BPMs yet? Are you there, maybe on mute?
Oh, I apologize. Sorry, this is Robert Fischer with the California. So the BPM changes are in process right now. I don't have the date for when they will be released in front of me. I will find that out and get it back to Rob.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And you're going to get back to me by email, Robert?
Yeah. What I'll do is I have a list of all of the folks who logged into this call, so I can respond to when I get that list of attendees. I'll send that out via email.
That would be great. Thanks, Randa.
Yep. Sure thing.
And that's all the questions I currently have.
All right. Now let's take a look at the readiness activities for this initiative. The market simulation window for this initiative will begin tomorrow, September 29th, and conclude on October 14th. This initiative will go live in the production environment on November 4th. The purpose of market simulation is to provide customers with the ability to preview and test new functionality before it is implemented in the production environment. As I mentioned previously, the changes being made for this particular initiative are internal changes to the market logic. So what can you expect to see after these changes are in place? After we implement the new code in production, market participants may see a change in the pattern of what they are awarded as FRP capacity. I've provided a link in the resource section to the structured scenarios, which go into each of the scenarios in detail. The scenarios list what the ISO will do and what the ISO market participants will do, along with the expected outcome and where you'll see the results. For these next few slides, we'll look at each of the scenarios at a high level. In our first scenario, we'll be demonstrating the minimum requirement to be enforced for each EIM area. In the second scenario, we'll demonstrate the flow of awards related to the buffer interval for each EIM area. Here, the new functionality will preserve the FRP awards from the previous run. And for folks looking at this slide here who are unfamiliar with the term RTPD, that stands for real-time pre-dispatch, which is another way to refer to the 15-minute market. The third scenario will demonstrate the flow of awards related to the buffer interval for each ISO area. So we're doing the same thing as scenario 2, just for a different BAA. And finally, the fourth scenario will demonstrate the minimum requirement to be enforced for each ISO area. For this market sim, there is an additional setup that's required to participate in the structured scenarios. EIM participants should submit requests to participate in this simulation via the marketsim@kaiso.com mailbox by tomorrow, September 29th. So if you have not yet indicated that you want to participate, please let us know by tomorrow that you would like to do that. As I mentioned before, you'll see a link to the structured scenarios in the slides that follow. In order to participate in Market Sim, you must be provisioned for access to the map stage environment. And we recommend that you attend the market simulation calls to stay informed on the timing of activities for this and other release initiatives. You will find dates and call-in details posted on the ISO calendar. The end of this presentation contains links to various resources that will provide you with more information. For more information about this initiative, including the draft final proposal, presentations related to the proposal, and a recording of that presentation, all of these items can be found on the page related to this stakeholder initiative, and you'll see a link to that page below on this slide. For more information on how we are implementing this initiative, you can refer to the business requirement specification and the market sim scenarios that are located on the release planning page under the Independent 2020 section, and you'll see a link to that page below. Now, this was a short session today, and we've reached the end of today's session. Are there any questions before we conclude the call?
Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please dial #2 on your telephone keypad. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted, at which point please then state your name, the company you work for, and your question. Again, it's #2 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. We do have a caller in queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, Rita. This is Chun-Lo from PG&E again. So I guess we, in that presentation, looks like it's only the EIM market participants should register for if they want to participate in this test. And also, I'm just curious if any SMEs from Kaiso in the room that kind of able to walk us through from the system change perspective and from the user perspective, like a market participant perspective, what can we validate?
Hi, this is Robert Fischer with California. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to make sure. I wouldn't say it's particularly just for the EIM participants, because the minimum requirement that is going to be implemented is most likely the majority of the time frame going to be implemented within the ISO region. And I say that because the requirement for that is if the ISO uncertainty requirement is 60% or greater than the entire EIM footprint requirement, which we've done some historical, and it's the majority of the time. And that only happens to EIM areas very infrequently. So I would suggest or recommend that you would register for the market simulation. Are there any questions about that? And then I can get to the second part of your question.
Well, I don't have any question for, since we do not have any resource, or we can't, we don't, this is not a resource specific, so other than we would like to know how to observe that, whether the result is what is expected, whether it's a case of expected,
Okay. For the minimum requirement, the expectation that I would set out is that I would expect for where the minimum requirement is enforced to see an increased level of FlexRamp awards. So, for example, if it were to occur within the ISO, I would expect scheduling coordinators to see an increased amount of awards occurring, because the minimum requirement is essentially there to make sure that there is an increase because the demand is needed in that region. In regards to the buffer interval, this one is going to be less frequent, but what I would say, or when I say less frequent, is in comparison to now, I would say that it's less frequent, as in what is the expected result is your energy schedule is going to match or not be moved when in the binding interval if you have a FlexRamp award, similarly to the advisory schedule that the FlexRamp energy schedule is procured at now. Under the current framework, if there is some, say, increased load or some system conditions that cause the prices to increase between the advisory energy schedule and the binding energy schedule, that energy schedule would respond, versus with this new buffer interval requirement, that energy schedule would be maintained, because the idea is that you're protecting that FlexRamp award for the 5-minute market. Any questions on that?
That's a very good, thank you for walking me through that. I do have a question. So, looks like we do need to have a comparison, the before and after, right? So, for the market sim, I wonder if you have a trade day that is that before implementing all this change into your system, and maybe a day that is similar day, weather condition or demand condition, then you have implemented this change into the system. So then you can observe whether there will be an increased level of FlexRamp, right? Otherwise it's very hard to say.
From my recollection of the market simulation scenarios, I think that is how we intended to set it up. We were going to do a day where there was, a day where there's enforcement, a day or hour, or 2 or 3 or 4, where the requirement was not enforced, and then enforce the requirement for another 3 to 4 hour time frame, so that there could be some comparisons. Specifically to the minimum requirement, you will be able to see a difference in the level of procurement. I also think I myself have volunteered to put some data together to show the differences between the two.
Oh, that would be wonderful if you can share with us afterwards, after the market sim. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we do have another caller in the question queue. We'll go to that caller. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Yeah, this is Emmy Stenstedt calling for Midway Sunset, and thank you, Chen. You asked most of my questions. So we will not actually be able to see when it's a buffer. We won't be able to tell that it's a buffer flex award. Is that correct?
So the idea is the maintaining of the flex ramp award all the way to the 5-minute market. And so it's very specific that could happen. And the example that I laid out earlier is that you get your flex ramp award and the energy schedule at that time frame was, at a level. Now you move into the binding interval. If the system conditions or prices increase, it's possible that your energy schedule would be dispatched into that range where that flex ramp award was. We're trying to avoid that because we want to save that energy for the 5-minute market. And so in order to see that happen, you would have to see a condition where that binding interval price increased from the procurement level where the flex ramp occurred, flex ramp award occurred. And so it's a little unique. It is possible that you may see that in the simulation. I think we're going to try and, increase some prices a bit just to make that occur, and it may happen naturally as well. So what I would recommend doing is just to see if you do get a flex ramp award, check your energy schedule for the binding interval in comparison to say, currently in production, where you may see those energy schedules increase between the advisory and then the binding.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, I'm not showing any other questions at this time. Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please dial #2 on your telephone keypad. Again, that's #2 on your telephone keypad if you have any questions. All right, I'm not showing any other questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Robert, for answering those and giving insight to our customers. Appreciate that. Folks, as I mentioned at the beginning, these slides are posted to the Learning Center on kaisa.com. In a couple of days, we will also post a recording of this session there as well. If you have questions on anything presented here today, please email them to customerreadiness@kaisa.com. I will get the answer about when those BPM changes will be published, and I will email those out to everybody who logged into the call today and provided their email address. And this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you for your participation. We hope you found it useful and informative. Have a great day.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.